In this video, we are going to work on factoring using the AC method. Personally, I like the AC method best. What I have found over the course of my teaching career is that this is the method that most students find to be the least frustrating of all the different methods of factoring. However, in your Algebra 2 class, if your Algebra 2 teacher used a different method of factoring, it is okay with me if you want to use that method in our class. This is just the one that I prefer. But if you have another one that you're really good at, that's okay with me. All right, in order for the AC method to work, you have to know what A and C are. So I look at the standard form of a quadratic, ax squared plus bx plus c, and I notice that A is the coefficient on the x squared. Notice that A is the number in front of the x squared. It's not the x squared itself. A, B, and C are the numbers. They're not the variables. So in this equation that we have here, 6x squared plus 5x plus 7, A is going to be the number in front of the x squared, which in this case is going to be 6. All right, so then B, I look right here, B is in front of the x, B is in front of the x, so that's going to be 5. And C is our constant term. C is the one that does not have a variable, so C in this case is 7. All right, let's try that again with this one. All right, so this one is a little bit different. I look in front of the x squared and I don't see anything. Okay, so that doesn't mean there's not an A. Think about the coefficient when you don't see anything, is that understood 1. So A is 1, B is the coefficient on x, but it's not just going to be 4, it's going to be negative 4. You have to take that negative into account. And then C, again, that's our constant over here on the end. C is 8. Okay, let's practice with that just a minute. Okay, so now let's see if we can use this for factoring. So I've got this one. It is in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. Now when I'm factoring and using the AC method, the first thing I want to do is look for that greatest common factor. Look for a GCF. So I look at A, B, and C, 21, 1, and -1, -2. They don't have anything in common. So I can go ahead and identify my A, B, and C. So A is going to be 21. That's the coefficient on the x squared. B, that's right here. That's the coefficient on x. And C, that's my constant term. Right here, C is -2. All right, so once I have identified those, the first thing I want to do is I want to multiply A and C together. That's why this is called the AC method, because you multiply A and C together. So A is 21, C is -2, and when I multiply those together, I get -42. Okay, now I want to try to find two numbers that multiply together to be -42 and add together to be +1. Okay, so you might need to write down your times tables for 42. You might need to pick up your calculator and do some division, but after a little while, you're going to realize that the two numbers I need are -7 and +6. -7 times +6 is -42. -7 plus +6 is -1. That's exactly what I need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this B term here in the middle, and I am going to replace it with the two numbers that I just came up with. So the ax squared part doesn't change. What changes is this, it's in the middle. So what I have there in the red box is going to go away, and I'm going to replace it with -7x plus 6x. Okay, notice that the variables that I chose here exactly match the variable that I have here. And my C of -2 does not change. All right, now once I get to this point, I want to cut it in half, and I always want to cut in front of the sign. And then I'm going to do the GCF of both pieces. So I'm going to look at these two first. The GCF of 21x squared and -7x, well, 7 goes into 21 and 7. And with my variables, I always pick the smallest exponent. This one has an exponent of 2. This one is an understood 1. Smallest is 1. And then I divide to figure out what's going to go in the parentheses. So 21 divided by 7, that's going to give me 3. And you might remember from Algebra 1 that when you divide, you subtract your exponents. 2 minus that understood 1 is 1. Bring down my sign. All right, now let's look at the next one. 7 divided by 7 is 1. And when I subtract my exponents, 1 minus 1 is 0, so there is no x on this second term. Okay, now let's look at the other two. I'll change colors so we can keep ourselves organized. We're looking at these two right now. And 6x and 2. All right, so what they have in common is a 2. Notice that this time I did not put an x because they don't have an x. This one has an x, but this one doesn't. They don't have an x in common, so I can't put x in my GCF. Just like before, we're going to divide. So 6 divided by 2, well, that's 3. And I have an x here, but not an x here. There's nothing to subtract, so I'll just bring it down. And then negative 2 divided by positive 2, negative 1. Okay, now what I want you to notice is that what's in the parentheses here and here is exactly the same. So I'm going to consider this my new GCF. This is going to go out in the front. And what I have remaining, 7x and positive 2, that's going to go in the parentheses here. Not going to work out to be my answer. Now, if I want to check this answer, I can FOIL it out to check it. And when you guys are working on these in class, I will help you work on your foiling. But for right now, we just want to focus on the factoring. All right, let's look at this one. So remember I said the first thing we always want to do is check for our GCF. So I have this one, and this one, 6, 21, and 9. Well, I know those are all divisible by 3. So I'm going to choose to divide a 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 21 divided by 3 is 7. And 9 divided by 3 is 3. Okay, so now when I get ready to identify A, B, and C, I want to look at this quadratic in the parentheses. I don't want to look at this one up here because I've changed it. I want to look at this one right here. So A is going to be positive 2, B is negative 7, and C is positive 3. Okay, now, what is our next step? All right, we're going to multiply A and C together. Okay, so let's do that. A, C, A is 2, C is 3, 2 times 3 is 6. So I want two numbers that multiply together to be 6 and add together to be negative 7. Okay, let's see what we can come up with. Two numbers that multiply together to be positive 6 and add together to be negative 7. Okay, so again, you're going to want to run through your times tables for 6. Find things that add together to be negative 7. You're going to get negative 1 and negative 6. Negative 1 times negative 6 is positive 6. Negative 1 plus negative 6 is negative 7. Okay, so I'm going to come back into my quadratic here, and I'm going to replace this one in the middle. Everything else is going to stay exactly the same. So my 3 that's on the outside stays the same. My ax squared stays the same, but my bx in the middle changes to negative 1x and negative 6x, and then my c that's on the end stays the same. Okay, now I'm going to cut it in half. So I'll cut it in half right here. And let's factor out our GCF. Well, this 3 in the front, it doesn't have anything to do with what's in the parentheses, so it just comes down. It's part of the answer, but it doesn't affect what we're going to do next. All right, 2x squared minus 1x. Let's see if we can find the GCF of those. So between 2 and 1, the GCF is 1. And x squared and x, remember we always pick our smallest exponent. The smallest between 2 and 1 is 1. And then to get the numbers that go in the parentheses, we divide. So 2 divided by 1 is 2. X squared divided by x, I'm going to subtract those exponents. 2 minus 1 is 1. All right, now let's divide this one. Negative 1 divided by 1 is negative 1. X to the first, 1 minus 1 is 0, so there's no x. Okay, now let's look at these second two. And I noticed something different from the last one. Do you see that in the parentheses here I have a positive and then a negative? Last time I had the same thing here, but now it's the opposite. It's a negative and then a positive. But what's in the parentheses has to match. So in order to make it match, I need to factor out a negative with my GCF because that's going to change the signs. So I look at the 6 and the 3. The GCF between 6 and 3 is 3. And instead of bringing out a positive 3 like I did last time, I'm going to factor out a negative 3 because that's going to change my signs. Also, notice like last time, I'm not using an X because they don't both have an X. My GCF cannot have an X in it because I only have an X here, but not here. All right, let's divide. Negative 6 divided by negative 3 is positive 2, right? So that matches. My X just comes down because there's nothing to divide it with. Positive 3 divided by negative 3 is negative 1. So again, that matches. Everything looks good. What's in my parentheses is the same. Got 2x minus 1 in both places. So now I'm ready to write my final answer. So that 3 comes down on the outside. The 2x minus 1 is going to go in that first parentheses together. And then in the other parentheses is going to be what's left over. 1x, or you can just write x if you want to, minus 3. And that's the answer, and you can use FOIL to check that if you want to. All right, let's try this last one. What would the first step be? Okay, in this case, we don't have a GCF, so we're going to skip over that step, but it's good that you remember that that was the first step. And now we're going to identify A, B, and C. All right, see if you can figure out what's A, what's B, and what's C. Right, A is 9, B is 6, C is 1. All right, so when I multiply A and C together, A and C is going to be 9 times 1, which is 9. All right, so I want two numbers that multiply together to be 9 and add together to be 6. Run through your times tables, two numbers that multiply together to be 9 and add together to be 6. All right, you should have found 3 and 3. So now we're going to replace this term in the middle. Always replace B. So A stays the same. B is going to change to use those two numbers we just found. And C stays the same. Okay, let's cut this in half. Factor out the GCF of both sides. So 9 and 3, focusing on those numbers, the GCF of 9 and 3 is 3. Now look at your variables. I have x squared and x to the first. I want to choose x to the first because the exponent is the smallest. And now I'm going to divide. 9 divided by 3 is 3. When I divide, I subtract my exponents. 2 minus 1 is 1. All right, now let's do this one. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And when I subtract my exponents, 1 minus 1 is 0, so there's no x. Okay, now this one might be a little bit tricky. What is the GCF of 1 and 3? Don't say there's not one because every two numbers have a GCF. What will divide into both 3 and 1? Well, the answer to that is 1. I know 1 would be understood, but I want you to go ahead and write it because it'll make the next step easier. All right, and let's divide. 3 divided by 1 is 3. And I'm going to bring down that x because there's nothing to divide it away right here. Didn't have x in common, so there's no x right here. And now divide 1 divided by 1 is 1. All right, look what's in your parentheses. This and this are the same. So let's write that down. The first parentheses is going to be 3x plus 1. The second parentheses is going to be what's left over on the outside. Well, this one also happens to be 3x plus 1. So very often you will see the answer for this written like 3x plus 1 in parentheses squared. And that is how we're going to do all of our factors.